Melanie's actually working on a wonderful book called Jainism and Comparative Theology, a multi-religious approach. And she's working on that with Professor Venu Mehta, who we heard from before. And today, Professor Barbato is going to present to us a topic of, the title of her topic is Personal Security and Jain Compassion in Action. So, Professor Barbato, I welcome you to the stage, and we thank you for coming so early from Fiji.
Hello, thank you very much for the introduction, and hello everyone. It's really good to be here and to be part of this wonderful initiative. I'm just going to share my presentation. Okay, can you see that?
Perfect, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So compassion for me, it means loving concern for the suffering of others. So when I was invited to this program, I was thinking, what are the things that cause great suffering to people? And my first answer from my field of interest was fear for their life due to threat of violence or being attacked or some other potentially lethal security risk. So this goes from everyday life, the risks that we face in our daily going about, but also to feeling unsafe out at night in the street or people in conflict zones, to a whole spectrum of risks and to personal security. So if we want to make a difference to people's lives, helping them to be and feel safe, and that can be a fundamental form and very effective when we want to show compassion. So therefore, I would like to talk today about personal security. And by personal security, I mean being and feeling safe from threats, danger, and especially physical harm. And personal security is one of the 7 forms of security under the human security paradigm that is used, for example, by the United Nations. And the term human security in itself is remarkable because it indicates that security is not typically thought of in terms of the human being. And one might wonder then from what perspective then? And here actually we have an older approach to security. And for a long time, security studies was mainly concerned with what happens between states. So the ultimate threat to security is war. And in a way, it seems logical to think about security in terms of military and state. But this approach has some shortcomings. So first, it can lose sight of the fact that the state or the military and any institution should really be justified through the service to people. And second, security threats these days are globally connected. States are just one factor of many, and war is just one threat of many. Today we have what is called like pluricrisis. In climate change, for example, it's a major risk factor in many regions, and the effects ripple out. So treating the state as such a privileged actor in security discussions, it's not making sense anymore in our highly interconnected world. This is why the concept of human security has been developed, which focuses more on what people need to live free of fear and want. Human security is typical thought of as 7 types. And today I'm picking personal security as the most immediate topic. Now, what can the Jain tradition contribute to discussions about personal security? Jainism starts from the personal level in offering a way for the soul to achieve liberation from bondage. It has at its core the concern with the individual soul, not with a political system or a nation state. But nevertheless, Jainism is not individualistic. Part of what sets the soul free is the understanding of the interconnectedness of all living beings. And that interconnectedness is based on similarity between us and other people, animals, plants, even the elements. On the most fundamental level, that is the existence of the soul in a body. In the Tattvaja Sutta, for example, we find that idea of the essential mutual cooperation of the souls rendering service to another. And if you think personal security is not just about actual physical harm, it's also about the fear of harm, that inner state, and that can really badly impact on the quality of life of those in insecure situations. The Acharanga Sutra beautifully makes the case for both humans and plants fearing and suffering physical injury. So it states the human person is born, the plant is also born. This has the faculty of discernment, that has the faculty of discernment. This has consciousness, that has consciousness. This one becomes sad or withers when cut, and that one becomes sad and withers when cut. And the list continues of the parallels, and then it states, having understood this, the sage should not act by himself violently towards plants, nor cause others to act so, nor allow others to act so. Part of being a person on the good way to liberation is thus understanding the similarity between themselves and other beings. This understanding can be framed purely intellectually as a comparison of categories or behaviors, but it also moralistically might be taken as an act of empathy, of compassion, rooted in the experience of face-to-face encounter. And I think this is something that generally in research is being acknowledged more and more, that many of the processes that we think are purely intellectual, they are actually emotional, value-based to a large degree. And for the current discussion, I think this passage from the Acharanga Sutra, we don't have to understand them as a discourse about humans and plants, but they can be taken in a way to show the criteria for the right to protection from personal harm or our duty of providing personal security. The arguments that we see set out by the Acharanga Sutra there, that consciousness or an emotional or otherwise observable effect from physical injury, or being a living, growing, transforming organism that wants to flourish and not to die, that can be of matter to discussions about personal security. This rationale entails the physical, as well as the more emotional and mental dimension, that is harm and fear of harm. Jains can therefore, from within their own tradition and with their own vocabulary of ahimsa and nonviolence, reach a conceptual basis quite similar to the concepts of personal security within the human security paradigm. And that opens up ways for entering these discussions. As in many other traditions, Jain renounces a call to disregard their concern for personal security, while simultaneously upholding the highest standard of nonviolence towards others. This might be one of the differences in the philosophical underpinnings of personal security concept and the Jain approach. For Jainism, what ultimately matters is the security of the soul. Temporary suffering, such as severe asceticism, even if shortening life, can have a place in that. So the human security paradigm, on the other hand, is immanent. That is, it is not concerned with ultimate reality or the fate of one beyond death. So this gives, despite all similarities, different ultimate frames of reference to the Jain approach and the human security approach. The human security approach, as is held by the United Nations, is an expansion of security more than the mere absence of harm or death, so the protection of different human rights. According to Sabina Akair, the objective of human security is to safeguard the vital core of all human lives from critical pervasive threats without impeding long-term human fulfillment. In that definition, the vital core is understood as a rudimentary but multidimensional set of human rights and human freedoms based in practical reason. It spans the freedom from fear and the freedom from want, and it has to be specified by appropriate procedures in context. For Jain, this vital core that all human life has will be the soul. This can be seen in opposition to the UN approach or in extension to it. In practice, however, individual and community detachment and personal security often work in synergy rather than opposition. I will now give two examples. Road safety, for example, is a personal security issue. Jain renouncers who walk on foot are under grave threat of car accidents, and there are many newspaper reports on how Jain monks or nuns are killed while walking. Lay Jains have taken different approaches to increasing the personal security on the roadside, so particularly campaigning to the authorities towards the building of pedestrian walkways in areas surrounding Jain sites, the request of police escorts, or general awareness raising against drink driving that endangers those who walk by the road. One newspaper article from Karnataka also describes how the Gambara monks getting harassed or people trying to prevent them from passing through roads. And that in one instance, devotees had to build a Jain for people to walk through safely. So personal security risks for traveling monks or nuns are increased because they walk on the road early in the morning, because they also have to walk on the roads that are not providing space for pedestrians, and because they get harassed by people who do not understand or respect Jain practices. While the commitments of Jain renouncers do not allow them to prioritize their personal security as they're focusing on their soul security, lay people can have the monks and nuns' personal security on the agenda, especially as caring for road safety will increase the safety of all. The Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific has pointed out that road safety is a holistic issue involving roads, vehicles, and human beings, and that needs coordination between different stakeholders. Personal security is part of a multi-stakeholder approach to tackling security risks. That means it's an approach that recognizes that many different parties have to be involved in these approaches. It ideally consists of the interlocking of 3 different levels: the individual effort, the group effort, and the state effort. Religious communities can play a significant role in here. Okay, so what I said about the places of worship was that there are many small things that can increase actually the safety at these places, and that it's good to approach them with a look for a change of thinking about personal security. But then that we also have to balance that, because there is a danger in approaching topic, I think, with a security focus. So we have to be aware of that, what is in political science called securitization, basically the shifting of any issue into a security issue that then justifies sometimes quite extreme responses. So I think for religious communities who want to enter into discussions about personal security, it's at the same time recognizing that what strengthens their own position is that they have this unique way of balancing different values. So on the one hand, security can be something that traditions can contribute because they have their own vocabulary. For Jainism, that would be ahimsa-based, the security language that they might use, the duty to protect the integrity of other beings. But they also have a hierarchy of values in which personal security, physical security is only one element in there. And for example, in Jainism, as we have also seen before, that attainment of liberation, that can sometimes be as important or ranked higher than personal security. So that awareness, that securitization moves, when they cross polarization, for example, that in itself is also a security risk. And this is, I think, something that communities point towards. Even the World Bank, for example, they studied that countries that are having polarized positions between 2 groups, they're at a 6 times higher risk of civil war than other societies. And polarization has been called the #1 security threat. So security is not just about identifying people or factors that might be dangerous. It's also about countering these divisions that are often caused by this thinking, which is not in line with the holistic approach of much of time thinking. So because security-mindedness can in itself become tense, fearful, and hostile, it's important, I think, to pursue this path of framing security as compassion in action, when it's about wanting people to feel safe and to be safe and doing something for that. So for Jains, the ultimate goal of liberation of the soul is what makes soul security the highest form of security. And this reminds us that personal security is only one of many factors. So in Jainism, we can balance security and providing security with other important things. If we look at what these traditions really provide, it's really a differentiated approach to security. So in the case of Jainism, that would be first something that is very compatible with the human security approach, that is really about physical security. But then we have on the second level, spiritual security, that is about right faith, right knowledge, right action. And on the third level, we have the cultivation of ultimate attachment that is about like soul security, that can mark a shift from self-centeredness to reality-centeredness, that is really beyond these UN-based or very often simplistic discussions of security. So I think Jainism can really contribute to a multifaceted approach to security that even expands on the human security discussion, which in itself tries to be more differentiated than the traditional security approach. But Jainism, I think, can enter to make that even more diverse and multifaceted. Sorry for that again about the disconnections. I'm closing now in case I'm gone again. So thank you very much.
Totally forgiven. You don't need to apologize. Don't worry about it. It happened, as I mentioned, it happened to me earlier this week, Melanie, and I know the feeling, but you did great. And what I really appreciate about your work, and having known you now for a couple of years, and your work as it's developed in the book that you're doing on comparative theology, is in terms of engaged Jainism, you're really bringing Jain principles into a very particular conversation with a very particular topic. And here it's human security. You'll be offering a course on human security with us in the Jain tradition soon. Wonderful topic. And I can already see that the questions that have come in the Q&A really are trying to grapple with this, engaging these principles with these Jain principles with a very real kind of concrete reality that we live in. And also the kind of secular approaches that are taken at the UN, for example, right? So our first question comes from Chaitanya, Dr. Rajamani, who's also one of our graduate students, who says, how might our communities transform if we viewed personal security as a collective responsibility rather than an individual burden based on Jain teachings? Is that how you're even interpreting it? Does that question make sense?
Yes, I think so. And if you take human security framing, that is about multi-level approaches. And this part I actually like a lot, that it says it's not about one or the other. Yes, in a way, it is a personal duty, but it is also about the importance of communities, that people together, they can form meaningful associations for addressing issues that will then benefit the individual. So one of the other subtopics actually of the 7 types of human security is community security, meaning the importance of preserving the stability and the flourishing of communities, because people do not exist in isolation, they exist in some form of communities. So I think that interconnectedness between the community and the individual, that is very important. And there, I hope that your Compassion and Action initiative, it might inspire some of these things in terms that it can highlight how do people already get together in terms of voluntary associations, or in terms of doing good things in the world together, that are bridging these needs for the individual security and the more collective action. And the example I gave on the road safety, I don't know if that was still in what I spoke about. It's about the renouncer, who obviously has like a more inner focused approach to life, but how that can in personal security discussions still be connected to the lay people's more maybe social concern for their community, and how that is not in opposition, just as like feeding the renouncer and the renouncer. There are levels of interaction there, that you're not supposed to cook for that person directly, but there are still interactions going on that are very important for both sides. So yes, I think that's a great point, that we have to think from both directions. From the inner personal, it's nothing wrong with that. It's very important to have that individual focused aspect, I think, in Jain teachings. But the community aspects, they are also important, and they are already there. They are already happening. And I think, there will probably be many great examples of what Jain communities are doing for others to be more secure from coming out from your initiative.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because then also tomorrow we'll have some wonderful leaders from the Jain community who have various nonprofits that are engaged in various forms of work that really focus on some of the biggest forms of human insecurity with regard to food and education and healthcare. So we'll be hearing from all those thought leaders tomorrow, some of whom I know personally now, Melanie. So yeah, thanks. That really sets us up well for that panel tomorrow. We also have a great question from Gilbert Valentine, which says, with the key issue of ahimsa, does the Jain philosophy have any emphasis on solutions to prevent warfare and promote peace? For example, does it have advice and guidance on effective diplomacy? So I guess this points back to the other point you brought up about warfare and whatnot, and militarization.
Yeah, I think the Jain position on warfare is very interesting because there are Jains serving in the military, which is often pointed out as a tension to that commitment to ahimsa. But I think the Jain tradition has thought in detail about that duty to protect also, and how the real life issues, the difficulty of choosing one value over the other, and how governance of states that requires some form of preparedness to protect, how that can go along with a commitment to ahimsa. So advisors, Jain advisors to worldly rulers, they would try to bring in that highest value of nonviolence, so only defensive wars, a cultivation of proper attitude. And I think these things, just as they were in history, they are still applicable now. Much of what I'm doing is thinking about translation processes between different communication systems. So often religious or philosophical language is thought as very different from the language of diplomacy. But I think that terms like ahimsa, they can actually speak with lots of value to diplomatic discussions, and that it should not be accepted, especially in times when there is so much talking about the need for the post-secular framing of what is going on in the world. It should not be excluded to speak about all these Jain values of compassion, all these terms that we have discussed as part of this panel. They can find a way into diplomatic documents. It's just a matter of translation processes.
Yeah, and I know that some of your work, in particular, I just saw you published a chapter in the new Anekantavada volume, has focused on various applications of Anekantavada in these kind of difficult spaces, or challenging spaces. And so that might be one of the tools as well that you would probably also recommend, I imagine, for having these kind of discussions of diplomacy, just based on other work that I know that you've done. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so there are many areas that Jains can speak of, I think, confidently, because there's this rich tradition. So I've been thinking about in education spaces, for example, not just as content, but also to provide for frameworks. And it's about thinking, how can the language be framed in ways that it is understandable for both sides. Much of this is going on, so I think it's great work done at Arihanta Institute also in these directions of really showing the applicability of traditional philosophical contexts to modern discussions.
Yeah, it's great to engage these ideas with the contemporary issues of our time, and you and all the other presenters have done that so wonderfully in the conference, and I really do thank you for your time. I realize we're running up against time. I didn't know if Alba, you were going to pose a question, or did you have a question that you typed in the chat?
Well, it's a short comment. I can just say it directly. So yeah, Melanie, but it was a very thoughtful presentation. But when I first heard you talking about security, so I appreciate the other perspectives that you gave us. And my concern, I guess, is more about is because there's this narrative and this discourse very strong. I don't know if Europe is so strong, but in the United States is very strong about security, and how this is being used, I don't think is at all in the sense that that we might want it to be used, right? Security in the discourse these days, especially by politicians and in social media, is really about controlling, manipulating. So yeah, I'm glad to know about others' interpretations of security, and I was wondering if you just can say something about that, or maybe it's not so strong in Europe. So
yeah. Thank you very much. This is actually the context in a way that I was trying to respond to with my presentation, because to rethink security as compassion in action, because exactly compassion is what is taken out of much of the current political security discussions. It's about getting rid of people who might not have the perfect visa status. It's really incompassionate. It's devaluing compassion as part of human life. And I think that many traditions can say that you cannot separate security from compassion, because security is really part of a bigger frame of human flourishing. And if the individual does not count in there, and a good life, then that whole framework of security, it's just not life-giving, it's destructive. So it's challenging exactly what you were saying. Thank you so much for that.
I think it's completely the other side in a sense, because here, as I'm saying, the discourse on security is really tied to the military, to fear, to imposing all these things that the Jain tradition is trying to, they don't want. So here is really about yeah, military and all the opposite. So yeah, thank you for flipping that.
Thank you.
You've flipped the discourse. Yeah, thank you for engaging this very important issue, and Alba for pointing out that important nuance, because it is the other discourse that's taking place in a lot of parts of the world right now. So thank you, Professor Melanie Barbato, for joining us from Fiji so early in the morning. And I thank all of our presenters for this first day of the Compassion in Action Conference, the third annual Engage Jain Studies Conference. Tomorrow, we're going to hear from a number of other wonderful leaders, thought leaders, members of the community, both young and old, all different age groups, about practicing compassion in action in the world. I didn't know if our CEO and President Parveen Jain wanted to say any last words, but if Parveen Jain, did you want to say anything?
Jai Jinendra, thank you very much, everybody, for great presentations today. It was spellbinding. Really could not leave the screen or computer, because every conversation, every presentation was just great. So we are looking forward to another great day tomorrow.
Outstanding. Yes, thank you so much for those final words. Thank you to all of our presenters and our audience members for your close attention and participation and all the great questions that came through. We start at the same time tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific, and we go until 1 p.m. Pacific. So it'll be another 4 hours tomorrow of wonderful members of the community, thought leaders in the community. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday or Sunday, wherever
Jai
you are.
Jinendra.
Jai Jinendra.